Welcome to Daily Bible Devotions. We are now on our day 4 of our series on Epistemology. And we continue today by examining our faith. Is our faith blind acceptance? Or is faith really, by its definition, is it blind acceptance? But there are things that we have to think about here. Whenever we talk about faith, are we really talking about blind faith and honest doubt? Or is it possible that what's at stake whenever we talk about believing and knowing is really honest faith and blind doubt? Not only faith can be blind, but our doubts can be blind as well. And what we don't want is to be blind in anything. We don't want that. Uh, Especially in Christianity, look at this passage from Luke chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things accomplished among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word, it seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in consecutive order, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the exact truth about the things you have been taught. Now, this was authored by Luke, a doctor, someone who is a man of science, meticulous in details. Now, he's writing to someone named Theophilus, and probably an official somewhere because he addressed him as most excellent Theophilus. And he's saying that these things that's being presented to Theophilus are things that he investigated carefully from the beginning. And he's writing it out in a what? In a consecutive order. There is a system, there is a science. He is applying his scientific methodology in this undertaking of the records about Jesus. So we're talking about, yesterday we talked about how our beliefs must be anchored on real things. They must correspond to reality. And here, Luke is presenting his faith based on what? Based on reasons, based on details, based on facts that he investigated carefully. Now, there are competing views about this faith versus reason thing. A lot of people, especially people in the colleges and universities, they pit faith and reason against each other. You will go to college, you will go to universities, and you will hear this a lot. It's as if when you have faith, you don't have reason. Or if you have reason, you don't have faith. And these are the competing views there, that you are supposed to have reason without faith. But if you have reason, then you have to abandon faith altogether. Or if you will choose faith, you'll have to abandon reason altogether. But what we're proposing is that if you are to have faith, it must be supported by reason. And that is not a thing that is unfaithful or unspiritual or unchristian or whatever. And any faith, any real faith must be reasonable. Look at this. Faith does not derive its value from the intensity. Sorry, that's from the intensity of the believing act or from the sincerity of the believer, but from the reality and the substance of what it is that we actually believe. It doesn't matter how sincere you are in believing that. It doesn't matter how intense your believing act is. You're praying so much, you're really believing it so hard. It doesn't matter. If what you're believing is not true, if what you're believing is simply a delusion, a an imagination, then it doesn't matter. Your faith will be of no value. And that has been mentioned again and again in the Bible. So it's about the reality and the substance of what it is that you actually believe. And we mentioned this, that religion is just like any subject. Belief is always the foundation of knowledge, but your belief will always push forward to knowing reality, knowing the things around you. Paul said this in his letter to the Romans. Romans chapter 12, verse 2, he said, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." He's talking about a renewing of the mind. He's not saying abandoning of your mind. He says renewing. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. His good, pleasing, and perfect will. Again and again, we're saying that Christianity, especially Christianity, is an invitation for us not just to believe, but to know, to think, to be logical, to apply all this, to examine. Because we are not being invited to follow blindly, to have faith blindly. Actually, as a teacher, I don't want you to be blind in anything. Whether you're going to doubt, whether you're going to have faith, it doesn't have to be blindly. You have to possess reason. You have to examine everything. If you're going to have faith, then do so because it's reasonable. Now, I will not push you to have faith. If you don't want to have faith, as long as your stand is reasonable. If you don't want faith, it has to be reasonable. Not just because you're doing that blindly, not just because you're doing that because everyone else is doing that, or that because it's fashionable, it's trendy to not have faith. It has to be reasonable always. In Paul's letter to Timothy, in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15, he says this, do your best. So Paul speaking to his disciple Timothy, do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, and who correctly handles the word of truth. God doesn't want blind followers. Never wanted that. God wants people who examines things clearly and who will follow him reasonably, faithfully. Someone who is not thinking, someone who is just doing things blindly, following blindly, cannot be truly faithful. And that's not what God wants. God wants you to be faithful in everything that you do. And you can only do that if you will love him with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your strength, and with all of your mind.